We now move over to the next higher energy range, and that is the infrared region, where we will be learning about vibrational spectroscopy. But before we understand vibrational spectroscopy, we will be talking about the essentials of the simple harmonic oscillator and how it governs the energy levels of vibration. So, we will understand the interacting forces in species, and we will understand the essentials of the simple harmonic motion, and we will get an introduction to normal coordinates. After the microwave region, the next higher energy electromagnetic radiation is infrared. The energy of the radiation in this region of the electromagnetic spectrum is just sufficient to cause excitation of vibrations in molecules. However, since rotations of molecules require less energy than that supplied by infrared radiation, rotational levels are also simultaneously excited. First, we will invoke the Born-Oppenheimer approximation and assume that the two kinds of motions do not interact. We will treat them separately and then see what effect one has on the other one. In effect, we first study infrared spectra in solution, where the close proximity of the molecules, because in solution they are very close to each other, they are not able to rotate freely, and this makes rotational motion very difficult, and we are left to deal only with vibrational motion independent of rotational spectroscopy. The infrared region is divided into three parts. The first is the far infrared region, and the wave numbers are 400 to 10 centimeter inverse, and which is 100 to 30 micrometer wavelength, and this is adjacent to the microwave region and has the lowest energy of the infrared. Rotations of small molecules are observed in this region. The next is the mid infrared region, which is from 4000 to 400 centimeter inverse, that is 30 to 1.4 micrometer wavelength, where most of the fundamental vibration transitions and vibration rotation spectra of most molecules are observed in this region. The highest energy infrared radiation is near infrared (NIR), which is adjacent to visible radiation, and overtones of vibrations are observed in this particular region. There are no strict boundaries or divisions between these regions, nor is the kind of spectra observed therein, because it can depend upon the molecule, and hence these divisions are based on the kind of detector technology needed for observing their infrared radiation. Infrared spectroscopy uses the fact that vibrational energy levels are quantized and molecules vibrate at discrete frequencies determined by their reduced mass and strength of bonds, which are determined by the shape of their potential energy diagram. So, in infrared spectroscopy, we will be learning about vibrational energy levels, and we will also recognize that these depend upon the reduced masses of the species that are involved, the bonds, and the strengths of the bonds which are connecting the two atoms. So, as we did before, we will first talk about the diatomic molecule and the classical model of that, and then go on to the quantum mechanical model, and then discuss the selection rules, the populations and so on, and then finally we will be talking about polyatomic molecules. So, we will first use the classical model, which is that of the simple harmonic oscillator, to understand vibrational motion, and then extend what we have learned to the molecular systems where quantization effects will be observed. So, first we will learn about the energy of a diatomic molecule. Let us see what happens when two atoms combine to form a molecule. When two atoms combine to form a bond, there is a balancing of different kinds of forces. On one hand, there is repulsion between the positively charged nuclei of the two atoms and between the negatively charged electron clouds of the two atoms. But on the other hand, there is also an attraction between the nucleus of one atom and the electrons of the other atom, and vice versa. The two atoms settle at a mean internuclear distance whenever you have two opposing kind of forces. One is the repulsions between the two atoms and the other is the attraction between the two atoms. There will be a point where there is a balance of all these forces, and this is the mean internuclear distance, which is also known as the equilibrium bond length, and we will represent it as Re with a small r in whatever follows in this model. And at this point all these forces are just balanced and the energy of the whole system is at a minimum. As you understand that the energy always tries to find a minimum. So, this is the internuclear distance at which the bond will remain. So, if you squeeze the atoms together, that means if you reduce the internuclear distance, that means you are bringing the two atoms close to each other, the repulsive forces will rise because you have two similarly charged nuclei having a large number of protons, which will repel each other so much that the repulsive forces will increase, and that means that the energy will increase. And the same thing happens when you extend the bond, that means you pull them apart. What will happen? The bond distance increases, and that means that the attractive forces will decrease and again the energy will rise. So, in either case what happens is that an attempt to distort the molecule requires you to input some energy and the total energy rises at the minimum of energy at the internuclear distance, and this is referred to as the bond length also. So, the equilibrium internuclear distance Re is called the bond length of the molecule, and this is where it is comfortable. If you try to increase the bond length, then also the energy rises. If you decrease the bond length beyond this, then also the energy rises and it is comfortable in this particular position. Now, the simplest way to represent this situation is given by a simple classical model, and this is called the simple harmonic oscillator. So, we begin with a description of the simple harmonic oscillator, get the energy levels in terms of classical theory and see what quantization will do to these energy levels. Any attempt to distort a bond from its equilibrium position is met with resistance. According to Hooke's law, for an elastic bond, the restoring force is directly proportional to the amount of extension or compression of this bond. So, we have already learned that if you try to extend the bond or if you compress the bond, there will be an increase in energy, and when you do this, there will be an opposing force which will try to bring it back to the equilibrium internuclear distance. So, we will first consider a molecule which is like carbon monoxide, and we purposely taken an example of carbon monoxide, which is a heteronuclear diatomic molecule. There is a bond connecting them which we assume is like a spring, and it obeys Hooke's law, where the restoring force is proportional to the amount of extension or compression, and these are the three phases: the equilibrium internuclear distance, increased and decreased from the stretching and compression of the diatomic molecule. So, according to Hooke's law, the restoring force is proportional to the amount of extension or compression, which we will call as x, and F is equal to ma is equal to minus kx. In terms of the masses of the two atoms m1 and m2 and the coordinates, that is x1 and x2, we can write x is equal to x2 minus x1. That means this is a system of two coupled differential equations. For the first atom, mass into A is equal to m1, because we are talking about the first atom, d2x1 by dt square. And what is this? This is the second derivative of x1, and this is equal to k into x2 minus x1. And similarly, m2 d2 x2 by dt square is equal to minus k into x2 minus x1. They are coupled because the solution of x1 depends on x2 and that of x2 depends on x1. Since the above expressions refer to second order differential equations, the trial solutions can be taken as, you know that second order differential equations are given in terms of solutions which are either in terms of cos or sine or exponential. So, in this case we take the cos solution and we say x1 is equal to a1 cos alpha t and x2 is equal to a2 cos alpha t, and here a1 and a2 are the amplitudes of vibration of the two atoms which are different. In one case it is a1, the other one it is a2, and alpha is the angular frequency of the vibration, and you will note that I have used the same value of alpha for the two atoms, but the amplitudes can be different because the two atoms can only vibrate with the same frequency. If they vibrate with different frequencies, then they will never come back to the equilibrium position. So when you substitute in that equation, what you find is minus m1 alpha square, we've used second derivative, into a1 cos alpha t is equal to k into a2 cos alpha t minus a1 cos alpha t, and similarly this is equal to k minus m2 alpha square into a2 minus ka2 is equal to 0, and similarly for the minus ka1 plus k minus m2 alpha square into a2 is equal to 0. So these two equations can be written in terms of determinants as k minus m1 alpha square, and then a12 is minus k, the other one is minus k minus m2 alpha square, and this whole determinant, then you have a vector a1 and a2, and both of them are equal to 0, and since the amplitudes cannot be 0, that means that the vector consisting of a1 and a2 cannot be 0, and for this equation to hold true, the determinant should be equal to 0. So to solve this equation, either you put the determinant equal to 0 or a1 and a2 both should be equal to 0. Now that is a trivial solution because both the amplitudes cannot be 0. If both the amplitudes are 0, it is not vibrating at all. So the other solution is that the determinant should be equal to 0. We expand that determinant and we can write down k minus m1 into alpha square into k minus m2 alpha square, and minus k square of that is equal to 0. When we expand, we get alpha square is equal to k into m1 plus m2 divided by m1 m2, and you can recognize that m1 m2 by m1 plus m2 is equal to mu. So this is equal to k by mu, and mu is the reduced mass of the system, k is the force constant. Where did we find this k? It was the restoring force was proportional to k. So if it is a strong bond, if it is a strong spring, k is large, and if it is a weak spring, then k is small. So this k is the force constant. The other root of the equation is 0. That is, in this mode the molecule is not vibrating at all because its vibrational frequency is equal to 0. So from these two solutions, what we infer is that the molecule can only vibrate with these frequencies, that is, one of them has to be 0 and the other one has to be equal to k by mu. The square of that angular frequency should be equal to k by mu, and these are the only two solutions which are possible. These are called the natural frequencies of vibration of this particular diatomic system carbon monoxide that we had taken. Thus, the vibrational frequency nu is equal to alpha by 2 pi. You know that the angular frequency omega is equal to, or alpha is equal to 2 pi nu. So, the frequency of vibration is given by alpha by 2 pi, and for an elastic bond it is dependent on two quantities, the reduced mass of the system and the force constant k, and nu I can write down as 1 by 2 pi into square root of k by mu in second inverse or Hertz unit. Thus, vibrational spectroscopy allows us to measure the strengths of chemical bonds, since the force constant is a measure of the resistance of a bond to distortion, and that means if it depends upon the strength of the bond. If it is a strong bond, it will resist any attempt to distort it, and if it is a weak bond, you can easily distort it. So this is one of the quantities that you will learn about when you study vibrational spectroscopy. Just now our solution had yielded two results. One is that the angular frequency of the vibration can either be 0, that means it is not vibrating at all, or it can be equal to alpha square can be equal to k by mu, and from this the frequency of vibration is equal to 1 by 2 pi square root of k by mu. You will recall that this is the same kind of equation that you obtained in physics when you were studying the pendulum. Now we introduce another term which is called normal coordinates. Consider a homonuclear diatomic molecule for simplicity, and we assume that the two atoms are connected with an elastic bond, and that means since we are talking about a homonuclear diatomic molecule, m is equal to m1 and this is also equal to m2, and we can write down that equation as m into x1 double dot is equal to k into x2 minus x1, and m x2 double dot is equal to minus k into x2 minus x1. The double dot, it is usual in classical physics to put a dot when you are taking a single derivative with respect to time. So, here we use a double dot, which means that we are talking about the second derivative with respect to time. Now, we will try to get these two independent equations in terms of some other coordinates. We add and subtract these two equations. When we add them, we can write down m into x1 double dot plus x2 double dot is equal to 0, and when you subtract them, you get another equation m into x2 double dot minus x1 double dot plus 2k into x2 minus x1 is equal to 0. So, it is as if we have got two new coordinates. We can write these equations in terms of q1 and q2. The first q1 is equal to x1 plus x2 and q2 is equal to x2 minus x1, and now we can rewrite these two equations by writing m into q1 double dot is equal to 0 or m q2 double dot plus 2k q2 is equal to 0. Now, you will observe that the first equation depends only on q1 and the second equation only on q2. That means, now they are no longer coupled. We have succeeded in decoupling these equations, one in terms of q1 and the other one in terms of q2. Now, you can independently solve them, because coupled differential equations are difficult to solve. To find the value of x1, you needed the value of x2, and similarly to find out x2, you needed the value of x1. So, here they are independent, they can be independently solved, and since they are both second order differential equations, as before, we write down q1 is equal to a1 cos omega 1t, and this, when you substitute in the equation, it gives you minus m omega 1 square into q1 is equal to 0, which implies that omega 1 is equal to 0 and the molecule is not vibrating in this particular what we call mode. In the second equation, q2 is equal to a2 cos omega 2 t can be substituted, and this gives us minus m omega 2 square into q2 plus 2k q2 is equal to 0, or we can write down omega 2 square is equal to 2k by m. So, we have seen that a simple transformation of variables, where we had just added the two equations and subtracted them, we were able to simplify the problem, but this is not always possible when you have a very complicated system. So, we have to work out a mechanism by which we can do it, and this is called normal coordinate analysis. In fact, these two are called normal coordinates. q1 and q2 are called the normal coordinates, and we have obtained them in this way, but for complicated systems it is very complicated to write down the expression, and we will work out the method of doing it. So, we will summarize this. Vibrations on molecules are studied in the infrared region of the electromagnetic spectrum. The classical model of the simple harmonic oscillator shows that the frequency of vibration depends on the force constant and it depends upon the reduced mass of the molecule, and we can understand that vibrational spectroscopy will give us an idea about the strengths of bonds and also about the masses of the atoms involved.